This is the group on the right where their attitude is, look, we can only get punched in the face so much before we punch back. And here's a good example. I'm going to use two examples. If the first crowd is like, look, you're allowed to hit once you've been hit. This crowd is, no, I'm going to hit people anytime I see them as my enemy. Right? Why? That's stupid. Why would I wait for someone to hit me first before I hit them? Because what if they knock me out? That's dumb. I'm not playing by I'm going to play by their rules.
I'm sorry. I would argue that the first group we talked about doesn't even think it's okay to hit if you've been hit first.
Okay, that's fine.
They think you basically you're like passive across the board. So you got passive, then
you have the people like, no, I'm going to hit first because anytime you give me an indication that you're my enemy, I'm hitting first. Now, to steelman their argument, I'm going to say right off the bat, I'm not in this camp. I'm not in this camp. But to steelman their argument, they do something like this. Have you ever seen? So, for instance, you'll see like maybe a 6-year-old or whatnot. They'll get in a fight, or they'll hit another kid and they'll take their toy, and the parent will come over and spank them. And you'll see this response where it's like, oh, you're going to hit your kid to showing them that hitting is wrong? No. I used an appropriate level of violence in order to demonstrate to my kid that hitting hurts and therefore you shouldn't do it. And it was restrained, right? But it was enough to demonstrate that you shouldn't do that because there's consequences and there's pain involved. That's very, very different than I'm just hauling off and hitting my kid because they angered me. There's a distinction there. So the steelman argument for this approach of like, it's time to just use some force is, stop telling me what if the shoe was on the other foot. Maybe the only thing they will understand is if they start to feel some of the pain for the very things they've been doing to us. So maybe the way to show them that lawfare is not acceptable is to use lawfare. Maybe the thing to show them that funding all of their little pet ideological projects like they did, like Doge uncovered, maybe the way to show them that that's not an appropriate use of government funds is to start funding the things that we want, and so on and so forth. It's basically they use state power however they want it in order to achieve their objectives. Fine. We're going to use state power however we want to achieve our objectives. And one of two things will happen. Either A, we'll get what we want, or B, at the very least, they'll finally realize this ain't the way to do business.
Where do I sign up? I'm sorry.
That is my steelman argument for their case.
Can I address a few of because as somebody who probably falls into this camp, how do I mean, let's just be honest, I probably do.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid of it because so each of these points, I wrote these down actually when we were building the outline, and we're not going to bring it up here, but I will read it off to a few people. So the first point that the previous crowd brought up was, this is tyranny. You already answered the question. What are you talking about? We were living under the tyranny of the left for 5 years post-COVID, 4.5 years, right? Mm-hmm. And arguably, we've been living under it for at least a generation. That's the first point. I don't need to imagine if the roles were reversed. They had been reversed. We had been suffering under them for decades. That's the first point. Second point is, oh, well, the next time that the left takes power, they're going to do something worse next time. What are you talking about? They respect no limitations on authority whatsoever.
That they can get away with.
They respect limitations. They're not going to do something that's totally suicidal to their movement. Yeah. Sometimes they will, right? Sometimes they will cross that boundary and there will be a backlash. But you know what?
They're constantly pushing and testing.
The backlash will never revert it back to before their ideology existed.
Agreed.
And so they're just constantly poking and prodding and pushing the envelope as far as they can go. And the only limitation on power that they respect is how far can they get away with this? Mm-hmm. That's the second point. Next point is, you're going to betray the founders or the Constitution, which leads into the whole, the process is good in and of itself. Yeah. Well, there's a famous quote it's a meme from a movie. And J.D. Vance actually said this at a speech a few years ago that, well, if the rule led you to this point, of what use was the rule? Uh-huh. And so, I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like the old, have you ever heard of the Lysander Spooner quote, which is weird because Lysander Spooner was kind of like an anarchist.
Big-time libertarian anarchist.
But post-liberals will sometimes quote Lysander Spooner as well, and they will say, either the Constitution has authorized the current government that we live under, or it was utterly incapable of preventing it from happening. Either way, of what use is it? Now, that's the ultra version of it. And then there's that final point about neutrality and legislating morality and stuff like that. And on that point, the response is very simple. No, morality is the only thing you can legislate. And every regime, and when I say regime, I mean government, right? Yeah. Every ruling power, every ruling ideology, every ruling political theology that has ever existed has had its own mythos. It's had its own sacred and profane. It's had its own right and wrong. It's had its own understanding of good and evil. And neutrality is a myth that we have bought into. We believe, oh, the state shouldn't make this decision. The state shouldn't say that this is right or wrong. We need to let people be free and make their own choices. Well, I've got news for you. A state that bans prayer in public schools and then puts porn in the kids' library is not neutral. It's already made a choice.
Yeah.
And when you adopt the lie that we need to be neutral, we can't make these decisions, that's government tyranny if we make those decisions. Well, guess what? The other side has no issue making that choice of their own. They will then impose their morality, their conception of the sacred, their conception of the good, and it will trample over your conception of it. And so if one side's going to win this thing and one vision of the sacred's going to prevail, it better be ours, because we've seen what their vision is.
So again, the Steelman argument, or perhaps just your argument, the Steelman argument for this is the left's, first of all, to the extent that we like these processes and procedures, well, the left's never going to learn because they don't respect them. So now maybe what they should get, they should lose the benefit of those processes and procedures in order to see whether or not they really want, what they claim to be asking for. The second part of it is and this is more of the absolutist point, where it's, no, it doesn't matter. There is no neutral ground. One side's going to win, one side's going to lose. And so I just want my side to be the one wielding power. That's kind of the Hail Caesar approach. It's like, look, this just is what it is, and I want my side in charge. Processes, procedures are only useful insofar as they achieve the objectives I want.
Well, it's also
one caveat that must be added. And this is what I think is an important distinction between what I'm articulating and what actually is a path to tyranny. Remember when we were bringing up the Lord of the Rings reference earlier?
Yeah.
Sauron is too liberal.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of things that we discuss which are issues. One of them is inflationary monetary policy. And why is inflation so bad? Because the good old Federal Reserve can essentially wipe out your savings in a heartbeat. Now, you could invest exclusively in the stock market, and I think investing in the stock market is a good idea, but if you really want to hedge against all of the crazy stuff that the government can do, precious metals is a good place to look. I have been going down this journey of getting more educated on this process, and the people I trust to educate me on it is Lear Capital. We've looked at a lot of gold companies. There's a reason why we picked Lear, and there's two things in particular I want to mention. One is their 401k package, and the other is the fact that they will actually ship the gold, silver, or whatever precious metals you're looking for to your house. So you can have physical possession. In an era of debanking, having physical possession of something that can be used for currency that has intrinsic value, I think is very important. If you would like to learn more about what Lear can provide for you and your family, I encourage you to either go to nick4lear.com, that's Nick, the number 4, lear.com, or call them at 800-707-4575. That's 800-707-4575. You risk nothing by just calling them up and getting the free information packet that they offer. Go check them out. Okay, go ahead and explain that.
I think you know where I'm going with this, because what is Sauron's goal? It's to subjugate and dominate the people of Middle-earth. That's his will.
Yeah.
That's not the will of Eru, who's the god of Middle-earth that created the world. That's kind of Tolkien's own stand-in for himself in a way.
I don't think that analogy holds up.
Do you get where I'm going with this?
Yes. The point you're making. Wait a second. The point you're making is that Sauron is still applying a liberal framework, because his liberal framework is to deny. If classical liberalism, or liberalism in general, we'll just say this: if liberalism in general holds itself up to be the ultimate good, right? Well, then Sauron is just saying,
it's prioritizing individual will.
I'm prioritizing my individual will, my self-actualization, and my self-actualization says I get to rule everything. in rejection to God's will,
to the transcendent.
Yes. To the idea that there's an objective truth or morality which I must comport my beliefs, ideas, and identity toward.
Okay.
Yes.
Another element of this is also the fact that every time the left gets in power, they run as far and as fast as they can in the direction they want to go. And then our side never does that. And so this section of people, or this subset of people on the right, they want to see our side go as far and as fast and as hard as we can. And they actually look at some of the other elements within our side of the spectrum and go, you guys are feckless. There's no teeth to anything you do. Yeah. All you're doing is preserving what those guys put in place before. And so it's more of this idea of, let's first of all take away every tool in the left's toolbox, and whether it be defunding certain things and getting rid of getting rid of their ability to funnel funds from one place to the other. Let's just take an axe to all of these agencies. Let's get rid of all of this stuff. Let's add the tariffs and everything else. And so it's this idea that they just want to go so far, so fast, because that's what the left has done. And they know the left's going to try to pull us back the other direction. And so they want to go as far as they can so that it's harder for the left to pull us back.
No. See, but I disagree with how you categorize. I don't.
What do you disagree with?
The group we're talking about right now is not, let's just defund all of this stuff. The group we're talking about now is, no, let's keep this government apparatus in power and then turn it on them. That's the difference between the third group we're about to talk about. This group is like, no, I don't want to necessarily get rid of the Department of Education. I want to keep it to impose our way of thinking on education. I want to keep government power in place. I just want us to wield it.
I just want to come out and say I'm in favor of abolishing the Department of Education.
Yeah, I don't know that you're right on that. I'm not sure you're right.
I know I'm right,
guys,
because
there's nuance.
We set up this group to actually talk about a particular category that absolutely wants to wield government power, and they're not afraid. So the left wants to concentrate power in their hands in order to wield it to carry out their end states. What we're talking about is there is a right-wing response to that says the only way that we prevent wokeism in the future, the only way we prevent this sort of degeneracy, is you have a strong state apparatus which punishes that degeneracy. That's the very category we're talking about. So I'm not saying that this describes everybody that wants to use government power. I'm saying that this is the subset that
I think that is maybe the most extreme element of that group. But for the most part, what I see most of these people espousing has more to do with basically taking the reins and going as far as they can with it.
I think that there's a bit of nuance where both of you guys have legitimate points when it comes to describing this group. It's worth noting that not every single person in this second category wants to keep the Department of Education, for example, right? I don't want. I want to get rid of the Department of Education, but to your point, Nick, what we're trying to articulate is.
But do you want the government to play a role in education?
Yes, it will.
Okay, so the point.
I want to empower families as much as possible, but I'll put it like this: I don't want to empower left-wing families that want to indoctrinate their children into transgenderism.
Yes, that's my point. Right? Is that this is not as simple as, this is a group that, they just want to use. No, we're talking about three different categories here. One category seems to be afraid to use power even when they have it. Because they're so worried about it degrading into tyranny that they never use it. The second category that we're talking about is a group that doesn't think Donald Trump is going far enough. They want to use government power for very specific purposes. They're saying, no, the way we think about education, the way we think about families, the way we think about these things are all good and legitimate. And we should not only push the things we want, we should punish the things that we don't. And you're going to need some sort of government apparatus to do that. Now, there's varying degrees of that, right? There's varying extremes of that. But the whole purpose of talking about this group is that you have people now on the right that are saying classical liberalism is the problem, right? Our Constitution doesn't go anywhere near as far enough. We need to concentrate more power in the hands of an executive that will be able to protect us from these woke monsters. And that is what they believe.